Hey, what's going on, guys? Thanks for tuning in. Episode 7 of In the Pain Podcast, joined by me, your host, Rios. And as always, now that he's back, not to see that other guy again, we got Mario in the house. What's going on, man?
Hey, it's playoff season. NBA playoff season is back in Houston, so there's a lot to cheer about, I guess.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. It's been a few years. The last time the Rockets were in the playoffs, James Harden was still a member of the
Oh,
Rockets. It's been quite the journey for this group of guys. And for the fan base that's been watching, and for the NBA, they've basically the Rockets were perennial contenders year after year with James Harden. He
yes.
he wears a fat suit, forces his way out, goes to Brooklyn, and the franchise was in a pretty long free fall. They were basically a rudderless ship. I mean, when your best player is Victor Oladipo, your franchise is not going very far.
Oh, oh, wow. Forgot about that name.
Yeah, they were a tough team to watch from a just as a fan of the basketball. It was not a very pretty product. But the first couple of steps in the Rockets rebuild was two teenagers,
Yes.
two different career trajectories. With the number 2 pick, they took Jalen Green, and then in the middle of the draft, they made a trade and they got Alperen Sengun. Now with Sengun, they really didn't know what he would become. They didn't have the expectations were like they weren't really there. Now, with Jalen Green being the number 2 overall pick, expectations were a little bit higher. He had a fairly decent rookie season, but from there, very inconsistent. And then once Coach Udoka took over, then that's when you really saw them utilizing Sengun to his full capabilities,
Mhm.
utilizing him as a low post scorer, but also as a facilitator. And you saw his game flourish, and he improved year by year, setting multiple records along the way, getting a lot of comparisons to another European player in Nikola Jokic. And their games are very similar. They play very. They're both big men that are very good playmakers as well. And Sengun made his first All Star this year, deservedly so. And
Mhm.
Jalen Green, he's stepped it up this last 2 weeks. He is maintained. He typically with him, he has been very slow to start seasons, and typically after the All Star break is when he typically ramps it up. His points per game average jumps by 6-7 points, and he was able to maintain that form a little bit longer this season. And watching both him and Sengun be able to basically carry this young Rockets team, that's kind of what they needed down the stretch. Guys that can take over games, and they were able to beat multiple 50-win teams. They beat the Cavaliers twice. They've beaten the Boston Celtics. They've beaten the OKC Thunder twice. They have really made serious strides this season, and they are a serious contender in the West, finishing with the number 2 overall seed.
There was a lot of unknowns with this team. You had Sengun, you had Jalen Green, but then Smith Jr., he was still someone that was, a little iffy. Um, then you had Amen Thompson coming out of nowhere. You kind of knew you had something there. Eason with the def like it's just a lot of things on this team kind of just started to come together this season, I think. A lot of the play Amen Thompson really came out
Oh
of
yeah,
his shell once Smith went out with the injury. Then you're like, and then you couldn't take him out anymore. That's it. He cemented himself as
that's
a
a starter.
starter. And that's something you don't typically see in within the NBA rosters, but with something like Coach Udoka, he's not going to be one of those. He's not one of those coaches that just, yeah, you know what, we're good with this rotation here. He wants to see everybody play. He wants to make sure he knows what he has on his bench. So if he sees someone performing more, doing more, putting more output, more defense, you know what, I'm going to go with this guy. And so that's pretty much what he did with Thompson. And Smith came back from injury. Now he's rotating off the bench, and he's actually doing much better in that role as a bench player, coming off the bench, player, 6 man, leading that bench squad. So there's been a lot of surprises this season with the Rockets, and
Mhm.
it's really shown. Again, he's just still a young team, but they were able to get the number 2 seed, beat, like you were saying, Cleveland. These top tier teams that coming into the season, you didn't know if they were going to be able to defeat those teams because of how young they were still, how consistent their play was. So, they really started to show kind of who they can be going now this season and going forward.
Yeah, they've taken a very similar trajectory that the OKC Thunder did. They basically had to rebuild that entire franchise after
Yes.
basically losing Kevin Durant, losing Russell Westbrook, losing Serge Ibaka. Like they had to do a complete rebuild, and it took them a few years. And they stockpiled draft picks, and they've drafted really well, and they've been able to fortify their bench lineups with solid role players, and they've become the top team in the West, and they're last season, they were great in the regular season, but they weren't very battle tested. They're very similar to Duke. They didn't face adversity, and then once they did face a little bit of adversity in the playoffs, the inexperience showed. And I think with this
Yeah.
Rockets team, that's what a lot of people's thought process is, that these guys haven't really been tested in the playoffs. It's one thing to be tested during the regular season. The lights get a lot brighter
Definitely.
in playoff basketball. The crowds get more intense, the pressure's
Very.
up, and I'm kind of glad that they decided to stick pat with this young core and see what they were able to accomplish. See if they're able to overcome that adversity, overcome that pressure that comes with playoff basketball. Because that's where stars are born. That's where guys can really cement themselves and show that, hey, when the light's the brightest, I'm here to perform.
I want to, like you're saying, the Rockets were able to stay with this team. Before it wasn't like that. You had Daryl Morey. He was a flipper. I'm going to keep trading, until I think I have the right guy for the Rockets. And so now you have Raphael Stone. There were a lot of rumors with the Rockets within the trade. Kevin Durant possibility. Other players that were possibility of coming here to the Rockets, but he said we're not going to make a trade. I don't think we're going to make any moves. And so hey, we're going to ride this team, and we're going to see what we got. And so big ups to him for holding the line, because usually like I said, with the Rockets organization has not been like that before. And so and then it also got them to the point where they had to rebuild the way they did, because before it was hey, constant changing. So he's seen how it was before, and like, hey, you know what? I don't think that's going to work out for now and in the future, because if we can't keep these draft picks, or he's just hoarding draft picks, and so like he can flip those later on for another pick or another player. So this is definitely a different mindset that the Rockets have from the top down than it was before.
Oh, most definitely. I think they've taken a more methodical approach in building this roster for one reason, really. Before you can, wheel and deal because you had James Harden, who was arguably one of the top. He was the top scorer for several
Oh
seasons.
yeah.
I mean, in the history of the sport, like he's going to go down as one of the biggest offensive threats of all time. Like he was. There were moments where he was just unstoppable. You just could not contain him. So you could build around him. You could, trade all these draft picks. You can move all these assets around to build around him because he's a bona fide superstar. With this young Rockets team, there's not, even to this day, there's still not a bona fide superstar. You got some guys that are emerging, that they're on the cusp of greatness, but they're not there yet. And I think this test against the Golden State Warriors, guys that it's a former dynasty. They still got Steph Curry, who's the greatest shooter of all time. You got Jimmy Butler, who has carried not so great teams to the finals.
Yep.
They had no chance of winning those finals, but he kind of took them there. Similar to me to Allen Iverson. He dragged that Sixers team that had no business being in the NBA Finals and stealing a game from the Los Angeles Lakers that will go on the three-peat. That whole postseason, they lost one time. It was to Allen Iverson. Like he willed that team to victory in that one game, but again, he didn't have enough help to overcome all that. I mean, get Shaq and Kobe in their primes.
Oh, come on. Yeah, he had Eric Snow, McGee. Matumbo, he was just too nimble. Shaq was just beating him down.
And it's
But
on paper, you would think that the Sixers team would get swept. They stole one game from the Lakers. I mean,
that,
that's Allen Iverson just willing that team to victory, but that's
with
surprising
the
that
broken foot,
he does.
a fractured foot, he was doing that. So um, but again, a familiar foe in the NBA playoffs, Golden State Warriors, the Rockets. This is a different team. But as far as organizational wise, these two, they know each other. They've
They
been,
got
this 5 times. This is about to,
five
you
five times in
know.
the last 7 years.
So, and also this kind of reminiscent of the old Rockets Utah days, kind of when they were clashing. So this is like the modernized version of the Rockets and their foe. So Houston, the fans here in Houston, they have disdain, this ugly taste in their mouth from the Golden State just continually beating them for 4 years in a row. So
Yeah, it's one of those David versus Goliath stories. They had the team. It's funny, like the Warriors, beat them year after year, but they were the only team during the Warriors dynasty run that can go toe to toe with them and actually match up with them. Several times they went to Game 7, and if it wasn't for a Chris Paul hamstring pull, I honestly believe that Rockets team would have won the NBA Finals because they would have swept the Cavaliers that season. Because
what was the finals?
that Rockets team won 65 games that season, and they beat the Warriors a couple of times during the regular season, and they had them on the ropes in the Western Conference Finals. I think that's going to be in Houston sports history. It's going to be one of the biggest what ifs. Like, what if Chris Paul doesn't get injured in Game 5? Just to forget about the questionable officiating and the 27 pointers. I think if Chris Paul doesn't go down, because Chris Paul was what every team needs, that
Yes,
dog in the locker room.
definitely.
He was the dog in the locker room. Like when he said something, you listen to him because he was the team leader. James Harden was the best player, but James Harden is not like the guy that's going to basically will his teammates to victory. And he'll carry you, but being the guy to like make you want to play harder, push you to be better. Like that's not who James Harden is. And Chris Paul was
You
that guy.
know, the what ifs would always be there, but reality sets in. We know what happened and those outcomes. But this is just kind of like Jordan, right? Well, I mean, this a single player, but Jordan, when he was with the Bulls, it took him what 6 seasons, I think, to make it, you know, to uh to get over like Detroit, to get over, those teams in the East. So
Yeah.
kind of like with this organization, this is hey, it's you're gonna get there eventually, but how long is it going to take you? They still have Steph Curry, they still have Draymond Green, so they still have two people that are familiar with the Rockets organization. The fans here are familiar with them, so it's not like it's a whole new team. I mean, it's a whole new team basically, but those two leaders are still there leading the team. So the city knows, hey, this is still going to be a dogfight. This Steph Curry's still the best 3-point shooter in the game. Last night, whenever he pretty much closed out the game himself, he was just knocking threes down at the end to win the game pretty much and sealed it for the Golden State Warriors to move to where they're at now, to where they face the Rockets. So this is just he's just so good in the big time. So it's not going to stop.
Yeah, he's one of those guys like I mentioned earlier that when the lights are the brightest, he has stepped up. Mind you, in NBA Finals, doesn't have the greatest track record, but he has also had a team to support him. But in other moments, Olympics and the rest of the playoffs, he has always stepped up. When the team needed him. So I think this is. I had mentioned on another show. I think for this Rockets organization, this is probably the best matchup for them. Maybe not, as far as being the easier opponent, but being able to exercise a demon of their past, because that was the one team that that Rockets team could not get past was the Golden State Warriors. And this is going to be a good test for them. Like I said, it's a whole new different Rockets team. I think Amen Thompson said, like, hey, we're not those guys that got beat by the Warriors all those years back. That we're a whole different team. And he's right to an extent, but the organization, the city, they all remember the
Mhm.
year after year of losing to Golden State. Like,
Heartbreak.
you see them, you see the matchup come up on your screen. You're like,
Yes.
it's like
Exactly.
you're like again. But it was, I mean, that was peak basketball right there. Those two teams at their peaks going at it, and it was entertaining. And as a basketball purist, you loved it because it reminded you of the 80s and 90s when there was actual rivalries, and everyone wasn't
Oh,
buddy.
yeah,
They
definitely.
were they were trying to beat each other. And like I said, it's what the playoffs are about. Like you want to see the best of the best go at it. And those James Harden Rockets against Steph Curry Warriors, I mean, that was peak basketball. Most of the time, that was better than the actual NBA Finals because the Warriors,
Everyone said, yeah, everybody would say those were the finals because,
it really was.
it was just after that was pretty much the viewership, kinda, but
Because
that's what
basically,
everyone was looking at.
because once the Warriors made it to the finals, they pretty much were going to win either with a
Oh,
sweep or a
yeah.
women's sweep. It wasn't until Klay Thompson and Kevin Durant both got injured against Toronto where someone else was able to finally beat them.
Oh, it took injuries. It took major injuries for them for another team to overcome them. I mean, it's but, the hate's still there, I would say, even with new players. Eason, he's carrying a
Oh,
flag of hate. He said today, "I don't like Golden State."
oh,
So,
he has been carrying that banner for a while. Like I think he has generational hatred for the Golden State Warriors. And this is a good chance for them because I think the last couple of times he was out injured. So this is a good chance for him to, show I really don't like you guys. I'm gonna go out there. I'm gonna beat you.
Mhm.
This is the time to step up and do that. And this is gonna be a very good series. I think as far as all the first round matchups, this is probably the one I'm most excited to see because it's a tale of two different basically two organizations in two different directions. The
Oh,
Warriors,
yeah.
they're coming towards the end of their run. You have Steph Curry, who's in his mid 30s now. Draymond is his mid 30s. They're still elite, but Father Time is undefeated, and it's going to be interesting to see if they can continue this level of play, especially now that they added Jimmy Butler. It's a whole new element to the Warriors team. So it's going to be these are seasoned veterans who have been to multiple NBA finals versus this young Rockets team where the majority of the starting roster is under the age of 23. Their first time being in the playoffs,
Mhm.
playoff experience is Van Fleet, who's also an NBA champion that beat the Warriors, and Dylan Brooks, who has made the playoffs with the Memphis Grizzlies. But everybody else has not sniffed the playoffs at all. Like I said, they're all very young players. So it's going to be a very interesting job for Coach Udoka to get these guys mentally prepared and not get overwhelmed by the bright lights because playoff intensity is a whole different beast. If you've ever been to an NBA playoff game, it's a different vibe. You can feel
It's
the energy.
it's a grind. It's a definite grind, 7-game series. You're playing the same team, you're gonna get to the point where, if I always go left on a crossover, you already know. These teams are gonna figure each other out pretty quick. So it's the task and challenge is gonna be, can they do this for 7 games, right? So that's the thing. How did they continue to move the pieces around, get open looks, get drives, get the dunks, get the rebounds, continue how playing the way they play. It's tough. Once one team's, it's kind of like baseball, right? You got the pitcher and he goes around in the second, his second go around, the batters already know, like, oh, you know what, he threw this, and that. It's the same kind of with when it comes to the NBA playoffs. Hey, we already played them first game. They kind of ran these plays here, here, and here. So, they might do the same. Some teams have the same tendency to do the same thing each game, just
Mhm.
at different times. So it's like, hey, it's and that's where the chess match is going to be. And Steve Kerr, the guy's come on, the guy's a champion multiple times over. So he's a smart coach. He just coached the team to the Olympic gold medal. So he played with elite players throughout his whole life, and he's up to the challenge. Udoka, with this young roster, like you're saying, he's got to get them ready to go. But the thing I think they have right now is that they had some rest. They're more healthier. Steph Curry last night still got the thumb injury, so he did injure it again last night. But that again, it didn't affect him too much because he was just knocking the threes down at the end.
Yeah.
But that's something that can play a role because Scottie Pippen Jr. was kind of slowing him down a little bit. He was able to keep up with them a lot, but he did get his looks. But someone like Amen Thompson, he's been shutting them down for every series they played. So it's going to look different, but I think being that they're younger, that the Rockets are much younger, they got fresher legs. They can keep up that pace and keep it really just like wear them down. I think this game is just going to be a big grind. The series is going to come to a grind, and it's like who wants it more. It's going to be a big challenge.
Oh, it's definitely going to be a battle of attrition. And like you mentioned with the Rockets, they're younger, so they have the advantage as far as having the fresher legs, and health-wise, they have the advantage as well. But again, experience makes up for that a little bit.
Mhm.
I think here, coaching, I'm going to go a little bit even though Udoka hasn't won a championship. He took a similar team with the Boston Celtics when,
Oh yeah.
Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, they were young guys. He took those guys to the NBA Finals. They weren't ready to win it yet, but he knows what it takes to get there. So I think for him, it's going to be is making sure these guys are locked in, making sure they're locked in, and with him, he is not afraid to sit a guy who's not giving effort. But I think with this playoff series, it's really going to come down to the X's and O's because again, both teams are very talented. One's experienced, one is not, but one has the fresher
Mhm.
legs. And then one has, both teams have, guys that are lockdown defenders, the Warriors and Draymond Green, and the Rockets with Amen Thompson, who's probably going to get a few Defensive Player of the Year votes, which,
Oh
that's
yeah.
a huge step for him. I think if he would have played a little bit more in the beginning of the season, and especially with Wemby going down, not saying he would have been a lock, but he would have been a serious contender for Defensive Player of the Year. He has consistently shut down the opposing team's best player all season. So I'm kind of curious to see what the coach is going to do. Is he going to put him on Steph Curry, or is he going to match him up on Jimmy Butler? Because Jimmy Butler in the
Oh,
playoffs, I mean, they call him Jimmy Buckets for a reason. He's one of those
it's
guys that when he gets going, he gets going. So it's going to be an interesting chess match to see where and who they put Amen Thompson on.
I think that's kind of where Easton comes in, maybe. The defensive brothers there, I think they're gonna hold it down. I think I worry more about, and it's gonna be, everyone knows about the fouling situation. These refs get a little happy with these whistles, especially when Golden State's around, but, and so I feel Udoka's gonna have to do a lot of juggling because Amen Thompson may get into foul trouble, and so that's kind of where Easton will probably back him up. But again, it's just going to be who's going to be guarding who. Jimmy Buckets is there. You got to worry about everything. Watching last night's game, Jimmy was just the facilitator. He was just throwing it. He was everywhere. He was all over the game.
Yeah.
So it's not just Steph Curry all the time with the ball. Now Jimmy's there. He's the main one with the ball. He's facilitating. He's looking at everyone get open. So it's going to be a challenge. So it's going to be a big challenge. And so I just worry about when it comes to the fouling situation is how Udoka's going to respond to that and how the Rockets are going to respond as a team.
Yeah, another interesting wrinkle is going to be, do the Rockets kind of match up with the Warriors? Because the Warriors excel at small ball. They don't really have, dominant bigs, while the Rockets do. So I'm wondering I'm curious to see how they do the starting lineup and then also the bench rotation as well. Because the Warriors have a pretty deep bench. They not a lot of big names, but those guys, they know their roles and they play their roles well, and they've helped them turn their season around because there was a certain points during the season where the Warriors, didn't look like they're going to make the play in at a minimum. And they've, basically getting Jimmy Butler helped, turn the season around, but also their bench
Mhm.
stepping up when they need to. So it's going to be really curious to see how both coaches kind of, do the little chess match where, okay, so they're going big, I'm gonna play small ball, or vice versa. So I'm very curious to see how they do, how they rotate the lineups.
So I'm, same thing. I got concerns as well. Watching last night's game, um, Memphis kind of matches up with Rockets a little better. They kind of have some of the players, so
Yeah,
you can kind of get a look at, preview. Hey, this is kind of what can happen. And watching it last night, it was a disaster. Edie just could not do anything to put any. I mean, he was getting rebounds, but he just could not put anything up. As soon as he caught the ball, he was getting double teamed. They were smacking the ball out of his hand, or they were just putting a lot of pressure on him, and they were causing him to make a lot of turnovers. So, when you look at the Rockets and you look at so that's kind of where you see the similarities with the center as far as the position with the Rockets. So how the Rockets could go small and they have been effective. But again, you know, can the Rockets make them the Warriors their brand of basketball? And that's going to be kind of where's the pendulum going to swing? Who's going to play what kind of style? And so it's just contrasting styles. It's going to be hard, but I think the Rockets do have the players to match up with the small ball if they really need it. And again, being that they're young, I feel that the Rockets could have an advantage even when the small ball does come into play.
yeah. I think, like I mentioned, this going to be one of the most interesting first round matchups. And I think for this young Rockets team, this is going to be a great learning experience. Win or lose, they will come away a much better team because you
Oh
went,
yeah.
especially if this series goes to 7 games. I believe this series is going to 7 games. I think this is going to be one of those. It's going to be a true battle of attrition, and it's going to be who wants it more, because they different playing styles, different philosophies, but at the end of the day, it's basically you versus experience. Something we've seen in all sports, boxing,
Mhm.
MMA, and it's one of those you typically lean towards experience. Coming out on top. The Vegas odds has the Warriors favored. This is the second time in NBA history that a 7 seed was favored over the 2 seed. So that could also be motivation for these young guys because they really haven't got a lot of media love throughout the season until maybe after the All-Star break, when teams started to take them a little bit more seriously. Like, okay, these young Rockets are still, near the top of the West. Okay, maybe they weren't a fluke. Maybe they're for real. And these are young guys. I'm sure they take it personally. Like, no one gives them any media love. It's basically all everyone talks about is, the Lakers.
Oh, I'm sure they're talking about the Lakers now. But this is this is going to be a lot. I think what I want to see from the Rockets is, even though they have the first two games, how do they handle playing in Golden State in the playoff atmosphere?
That's gonna
That's
be
a very tough place to play. The crowd is just so loud. They get into it once the Golden State starts rolling, that's it. How are you going to overcome that? How are you going to, and that's kind of where I want to see how the Rockets respond to that. Yeah, you can, you got your two games here at home. Yes, you got to protect the court, but whenever it moves to the Golden State, that's where you really have to see
that's the
how they're
real.
going to respond. What do they do in those? Because I remember James Harden, whenever they were playing, he was knocking threes down, shushing the crowd. But once Golden State went on a little run, you can see the Rockets kind of fumbling a little bit. They get a little, out of whack. So how did this young team respond while playing in that atmosphere? That's going to be a big thing for me, and that's kind of what I want to see, how they take that and what they do with it.
That's gonna be the true test. If they're able to steal one game in Golden State, that's gonna go a long way for instilling
Oh yeah.
confidence, especially in that type of environment. I mean, these fans are used to seeing multiple championships, so
Hmm.
they're gonna do their best to defend their home court, and they're gonna make it tough on these young kids. So as the old saying goes, adversity builds character. So this is gonna be a
Oh
big
yeah.
test for you guys, and if they can win one game in Golden State, it's which I believe they will. It's going to go a long way in instilling confidence in them and give them the belief, like, you know what, we can beat these guys.
It's going to be a tall task, tough and tall, everything. It's going to be hard. It's going to be a hard route. No, this is not easy. It's the NBA. There's no easy games, especially when you have the first matchup is Golden State. This is usually one of those series you kind of see in the Western Conference Finals, not so early in the first round. So, it's like it's already hard hitting, and they're off to the races already. They don't have time to just waste. This is like, hey, you're in it. You're in the fire now. Usually, sometimes you get like AC, but the way the NBA's changed with the playoff, with the the in play game and all this and that. Golden State, hey, they did what they did. They're in the position that they are. So and now it's time. It's time for the chess match. Let's get it. I'm excited for it. I'm nervous for it, but I'm ready to see what happens and see what this young Rockets team does and see how they respond. And I know the city's excited for it too.
Yeah, it's the first time we're having playoff basketball in 6 years.
Oof,
It's
long
been a
time.
long time. No, it's funny because like on my social media, it shows you your memories.
Oh no.
Yeah, I'm getting all the the notifications. I'll see the pictures of me at the at a playoff game. Like, man, it's been a long time. So I think the
I
last one
don't
was
even know what it feels like anymore.
yeah, last one was in 2019. I'm like, man, it's been a long time because during 2020 it was during COVID. There was no fans allowed, so we couldn't go
Oh
watch.
yeah.
So the last one I went to was 6 years ago in 2019. I was like, man, just looking at the picture of the guys in the roster back then, I'm like, man, this team has come a long way, going from perennial Western Conference finalists to picking in the lottery 3 years in a row
you
to
know,
now
uh,
they they finish as the number 2 seed. They have a real chance to show people that they are for real, that they may be young, but they're hungry and they're ready to show the basketball world what they're capable of doing and showing them, hey, this season, the regular season wasn't a fluke. Like, we're for real. We're here to stay.
maybe the Rockets can bring the city together and kind of heal some of the wounds that happened with the Cougars. Because it's still playoff. That was playoff. It's still playoff basketball, just a different organization. But still, those wounds are still fresh. But maybe the Rockets can kind of, you know, patch it up a little bit. Heal the city, bring the city back, and like, hey, we can. Basketball's still here. We're still playing. We can do something for this city. The Rockets are just they can carry the city for now with on the basketball side.
Yeah, because the Astros ain't doing it.
Oh, oh, they lost today.
No, but speaking of the Cougars, I think this is a good lesson for them because what ultimately did the Cougars in was them letting their opponent dictate how the game was going to be played. They played Florida style of basketball, and Florida took advantage of that, and they were able to make a run and ultimately win the national championship. So I think for them, the lesson here is don't let Golden State dictate how you don't play into their strengths. Play your brand of basketball and let the chips fall where they may. Don't let them dictate the pace. Don't let them dictate how the game goes. Don't worry. I know everyone complains about officials across all sports, really, but
No,
don't let that be in the back of your mind. Don't leave it up to officials. Play your brand of basketball, and may the best man win.
we just gotta wait now. Now we're just waiting for the matchup this Sunday, first game. So still got some time on Easter too. the Lord riseth, and we'll see if the Lord give us a win, gives the Rockets a win.
Yeah, he has risen. Let's do predictions. So I'm gonna start with you, Mario. What are your predictions for Game One?
I, like I said, I'm excited. I'm nervous. But game one, the Rockets going to be here at home. First game, playoff game in 6 years. Uh, you know, I think I think they're ready. I think they're going to come out swinging. The Rockets are going to win. I I'm not going to say by how much, but I think it's going to be a close game. But I think they're going to eke it out, and they're going to, they're going to show that hey, we've arrived. The Rockets have arrived. This team is ready to go, and they're not scared of the mighty Golden State Warriors, Stephen Curry. So that's kind of my prediction for Game 1. I think the Rockets going to eke it out and show Golden State that they've arrived on the big stage.
No, I agree with you. I think the emotions are going to be pretty high in the building. It's going to be the first time in 6 seasons that the playoff basketball's in Houston. I think the fans are going to show out and they're going to help the team defend home court. And I think just riding that emotional momentum is going to carry them to they're going to eke out a win in game one. But the real test is going to be game two because the Warriors have been
Yeah.
here. They've done it before. They are going to make adjustments. The real test is going to be game two, seeing how both teams adjust to each other. And I think, me personally, I think they split the series in Houston, and they go back to Golden State 1-1.
That's gonna be that's kind of the worst scenario I'm thinking, just because again, the atmosphere in Golden State is just you know it's like no other team you ever played in the playoffs. This and I think the closest like team I've seen or fans whenever KD was there was OKC. Now that was crazy. That was a crazy crowd. But Golden State, the fans have just been there year after year after year, and they supported. They've been loud, and so I kind of feel they need to win both games here in Houston. Again, it's going to be tough, but if they can come in, they can go to Golden State with a 2-0 lead. They'll have a better chance. But again, it's just when it comes down to game three, is hot for me. Is whenever the adversity is really, really going to start because it's going to be tough to play that crowd in that building. Again, once the Golden State starts to feed the fans, it just gets crazier, and then it seems like Golden State cannot do wrong. They just keep making it and making it and making it, and then you're playing catch up from there.
Yeah. So as far as predictions for the rest of the series, it's going to be a dogfight, but I think they can steal at least one game in Golden State. But like I said, it's going to be a battle of attrition, especially because a lot of the guys are banged up, especially Steph Curry. Because if Curry goes down, there goes Golden State's chances. Because as good as Jimmy Butler is, I mean, they really depend a lot on Steph Curry. Just his leadership and his ability
Mhm.
to come through in the clutch. So it's going to be like we mentioned earlier. It's going to be youth versus experience. Game three, I think Golden State probably blows them out because their fans are they're familiar with the Houston jersey, and so they're gonna
Oh
let their
yeah.
Game four is the one that's gonna be really interesting to me because that's really gonna dictate how the series unfolds. Because if
Mhm.
the Warriors win, and they're gonna be up 3-1 at this point, but if Houston can steal one in Golden State, that puts them back at 2-2, and from there it's gonna be a real dogfight to the end, which is my
Yep.
prediction. I think Houston wins game four. Golden State wins game five, and I think Houston closes out the last two games, game 6 and 7 here in Houston, and go on to the next round. So it's going to be
You
a dog.
know, it's gonna be. I think. Um, I'm gonna be with you. I see the series splitting here in Houston. Game three. I think the Rockets gonna come out hot, but I think Golden State probably going to take that one as well. Game four, I think the Rockets, since they had that little taste of kind of how the atmosphere is in Golden State, they'll make the adjustments that they need to make, and they'll come out winning the game. But again, I think the series might, like you were saying earlier before, it's going to be a 7-game series, and then from there, it's just going to be who wants it more. You know, After game four, yeah, it's going to be who wants it more, and how bad do you want it. So and what are you going to do to get it? And
Yeah.
so that's going to be the real test. Again, the Rockets are young. that they've never been in this position before. Yet, this is the first time being in the playoffs. So, again, this is just a learning experience. And they're going to grow from this. Whatever happens, they're going to grow from it. But it's going to be hard. It's going to be a tough game, tough series. But in the end, the Rockets win it at home, but it's going to be a close one.
Yeah. Even if they don't win the first round, just being able to compete is a huge step forward for the franchise.
Mm-hmm.
It's not one of the situations where, if they lose in the first round and the whole season's a disappointment. This team has, made
That's true. Yeah.
strides from where they were 3 seasons ago after James Harden left. And to be able to compete and, go toe to toe with the Warriors, even if they ultimately lose, great learning experience. And it's, something to build, something for these young guys to build on it for, next season. But if they just, kind of fall flat on their face, it is
Oh,
going to raise serious, especially if, like, say, someone like Jalen Green really struggles with, and he has this season against the Warriors because he likes to drive to the paint, and the Warriors, they've been very
yeah.
good schematically at, taking that away from him and, forcing him to take contested long, jump shots. So it's going to be very curious to see how he performs. If he's able to, continue his elite level of play, gives him a better chance of winning. But if he struggles, it's just going to ramp up those rumors of him, possibly being moved in the offseason for, say, Devin Booker or who or someone else to place his position. There's a lot of riding on in this playoff series. Not just winning the games, but possibly players' futures. And the organization side is like, hey, maybe these guys, they're ready for the next step. Like, we'll keep this core intact. Or if they fall flat on their face, maybe we need to add a true superstar. It's going to be a very interesting playoff series for a number of reasons, on and off the court.
The Rockets hold their own faith in their own hands. So how they take it is going to be up to them. And like you're saying, there's a lot of questions that are going to be answered in this series, and what kind of things they'll be doing in the off season. But right now, it's still game one about to come up. So just let them have their give a little taste, and that way, hey, they see what the playoffs are like, see how how tough it is, what kind of a grind it is, and this builds excitement for next season, because hey, they finally made it. It's like a first step. They made it to the playoffs finally. What are they going to do next? Second round at least. So it's like, just you got to climb that ladder, and so finally they'll finally get to, like, hey, they're contending for a championship. So it's a crawl. You got to crawl before you walk, and then it's kind of what the Rockets are doing now.
Well, yeah, so that's going to do it for us this week, guys. We'll be back next week where we'll recap games 1 and 2. And we'll see just exactly how close our predictions were. We may be totally right, maybe totally wrong. Find out next week. And thanks again for tuning in. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at In the Paint Pod, as well as subscribe to our YouTube channel, In the Paint Cast. Make sure you also follow our Esquina, for they focus on Latino voices. Got a lot of great articles there. Got a lot of great content on different sports, not just basketball. You also get baseball. Football's coming back around in a couple months. So get a lot of content coming up. But yeah, so thanks for tuning in, guys, and we will see y'all next week. Peace.